I was always skeptical about apple cider vinegar and weight loss. The real research that one does in food as medicine, not the woo stuff, dose-dependent effect of apple cider vinegar on metabolism, and that's weight loss. That's actually a reduction in body composition when it comes to visceral fat. Those toxins are sticking around the next day, and your brain is pickled with some of these toxins that continue to linger, and you don't feel quite right. If our gut bacteria is healthy, meaning if our gut is healthy, the rest of our body tends to be healthy as well. Of 39 trillion bacteria, at least one species seems to be a guardian of healthy metabolism. And we've been missing this for decades. We don't understand the mechanism yet, but gut-brain connection is obviously there too. When you're a patient, if you encounter somebody who's like, oh, I know everything about the gut microbiome, you know that person is not a real researcher. The quest for immortality has been around for millennia.
Welcome to the Luke Coutinho Show, where we can learn to reimagine our lifestyle.
Dr. Lee Williams, it's such a pleasure to have you for the third time on our show. And I see you on Instagram every single day. Your book is in my bag when I travel all the time. And now we have a lot of people in India who have been reading your book and reaching out with so many questions. So it's, absolutely a privilege to say that you brought an amazing impact to the world of cellular nutrition in our country. And that's exactly what we've been trying to do. I think it's about time education starts to recognize the latest research that's coming from people like you who have spent years in the field of medicine and then cellular nutrition. And I think a lot of disease can actually change because while your books talk about so many ways, nutrition and lifestyle factors that we can use when we're sick, it also talks about what we can do when we're not sick and what we can do to prevent it. So thank you for joining us again today on the show. And I hope you've been doing well. Which part of the world are you in right now?
Well, I am in the United States. I'm in the Northeast in New England. And thanks very much for inviting me to come back. I've always enjoyed our conversations.
Thank you, doctor. I want to jump straight into it with apple cider vinegar. We've been using it for years with patients. We've looked up medical research on that and then came along your book with really cool research. And it's been working, but at the same time, you have social media that takes something and makes it into a trend. It makes it into a fad. And then people have the fear of using something which has been documented with research. So I would love for you to I'd love to start off by talking about the cases that we've had over the last 13 years, diabetes, metabolic disorders. And when you look at the data points of the impact of apple cider vinegar taken by a patient 30 minutes before a meal, or if they missed it after the meal on their blood glucose level, it's absolutely fantastic. And then someone comes across on Instagram and says, hey, drink apple cider to burn body fat. And that's when it becomes a fad and a trend. I would love for you to start off by talking to us about your research on apple cider vinegar and in different areas of our health and life that we can use it.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up because apple cider vinegar is one of these areas that has both myth as well as fact. And this is one of the things that I really enjoy doing is as a researcher and as a scientist as well as a doctor, how do we actually find the truth behind the myths? And then for the myths, how do we actually break those myths? How do we bust the myth, as we say, in order to arrive at what's real and what is actionable? So here's the thing. For years, I have heard from mostly friends that they were drinking apple cider vinegar, often in the morning time, for various health applications. And I had always been very skeptical. Vinegar is pretty strong. It can taste good in cooking, but it's a very strong substance to have by itself. And I always thought, if you put that strong vinegar in your mouth, you're going to be dissolving the enamel on your teeth, which can't be good for you. And it doesn't matter if it's apple cider or some other type of vinegar. Of course, apple cider sort of took on this mythic reputation of being something especially healthy. So is it the apple? Is it something in apples? Like, these are the things that a scientist like me begin to ask. But more importantly, I when it came to weight loss, which exactly as you said, Luke, weight loss tends to attract a lot of attention, which quickly becomes sort of a populist idea. Like, people want to believe something that might not be true. So I was always skeptical about apple cider vinegar and weight loss, but then the research starts to come out. And this is where I, myself as a scientist, I have to be honest by saying, you know, I can assume one thing, but if new data comes out that I look at and I critically evaluate, and the data shows that something is true or untrue, I've got to go with the data. So with apple cider vinegar, I was astounded to see that researchers in Japan had been studying a dose-dependent effect of apple cider vinegar on metabolism. And that's weight loss. That's actually a reduction in body composition when it comes to visceral fat. That's lowering of inflammatory markers in the blood. You know, the real research that one does in food as medicine, not the woo-woo stuff. And what I saw was really quite remarkable. First, in one of these research studies, they gave people what they called low dose, which is 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, versus high dose, which is 3 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar. So if you imagine in your kitchen taking out a bottle of apple cider vinegar and pouring 3 tablespoons in it into a small cup, all right, that 3 tablespoons is pretty easy to drink if you had to. It's a quick shot. Well, they studied this daily over the course of a month. And what they found indeed is that people who had any apple cider vinegar compared to a placebo, which is drinking water, that any apple cider vinegar would actually shrink waist circumference, which is the size of your waist, and the waist circumference reflects how much fat is in the tube of your body. Right. So, and that's visceral fat inside there. So, over the course of a month, apple cider vinegar drinkers had a shrinking of their waist circumference. So, and they had less body fat, and their inflammatory markers also went down, and they actually lost weight when you looked on a scale. That's pretty amazing to me that you can do a study to show that this works. Now, a couple of fine points. The people who had the higher dose, 3 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, lost more weight, lost more body fat than the ones who had 1 tablespoon. And that's a dose response, which is a good sign that there's something real biologically going on. All right. Usually if it's sort of, look, you can have different kinds of dose responses. This one was pretty convincing that something was working. If a little bit is good, a little bit more can actually have even a greater effect and lost more fat. And the fact that the type of fat that was lost was visceral fat. That is the harmful inflammatory fat that we really want to deal with, especially, by the way, in Southeast Asians. That's really the kind of the apple shape that people can become as they get older. And the apple is really where the waist size expands because you wind up actually growing more visceral fat. Visceral means guts. And visceral fat is a fat that kind of naturally grows around the guts. But when it builds up, you expand your waist size. So you want to kind of reverse that. Apple cider vinegar actually works. Now, a couple of things about it. When you break it down into what is actually happening, because I always ask, does something work in people? Doesn't work in people. Like we've cured cancer in mice for years. Doesn't mean that it's going to work in people, but something that works in people, now it's worth going back into exploring what's the mechanism of action? Like an inquiring scientist always wants to know. So guess what? It's not the apples in apple cider vinegar. It's not the apple source. It's the vinegar. It's the acetic acid. All vinegar is made with acetic acid. In fact, acetic acid is a definition of vinegar, which is another name for vinegar. So the chemists call it acetic acid. The chefs call it vinegar. All right. And vinegar actually works by preventing fat cells in our body. These fat cells are called adipocytes. Adipose, fat, site, cell. Vinegar, acetic acid, prevents fat cells from expanding. All right. And it also impedes your body's own ability to make new fat cells. So we all are born with fat cells. They expand. That's our fuel tank. If you are still eating and you're building more fat, your body can make new fat cells with stem cells. So now you actually create more fuel tanks and you can grow your fat mass. Acetic acid prevents the first fat masses from blowing up, like expanding, and it prevents the new ones from growing as well. And we think that that's really one of the primary mechanisms of action of acetic acid or vinegar. What does that mean? That means that apple cider vinegar is good. That's been shown in clinical studies, but it means that other vinegars are also good. White vinegar, red wine vinegar. There's all kinds of vinegars you can actually make with a variety of different fruits and vegetables, frankly, that can all be fermented to create that acetic acid. If you take a look at countries in Asia, they have black vinegar, fermented vinegars. There's a whole, go into any store that carries a variety of vinegars, and you will be blown away by the diversity of how you create vinegars. My health tip, anybody who is interested in exploring this for themselves, is if you are, whatever the vinegar is, please pick up the bottle and read the label for the ingredients, because you want to make sure that it really is indeed true apple cider vinegar or red wine vinegar, and it doesn't have other ingredients added to it, because many times well-intentioned companies will want to doctor up or put additives into a vinegar in order to make it more appealing. Great example is salad dressing. Salad dressing is made with vinegar and oil, but in a salad dressing, they'll put all kinds of things in there to make that product seem more appealing, and those additives can actually be detrimental to your health and detrimental to your metabolism.
Oh, thanks for that tip. That's amazing. And you started off with the enamel. So that's a myth. If you dilute your 3 tablespoons or your 2 or your 1 with a glass of water, you're diluting it. It has the same effect, but is it protecting your enamel or is it creating damage?
So it is true that if you take apple cider vinegar straight and you do it continuously, frequently, constantly, day in and day out, week after week, you will actually damage the enamel in your teeth, because it's strong stuff. I mean, think about it. You can, ask your grandmother. She'll tell you can use vinegar to clean stains off of a rug or a carpet or a piece of leather, right? That's strong stuff. But you want to actually dilute apple cider vinegar, like those 3 tablespoons or 1 tablespoon, in a glass of water. And that dilution is totally fine. I mean, think about it. We drink lemon juice and lime juice, in water, and it's totally fine. But do dilute it in something with water is ideal, rather than have it straight. And if you have it straight, if you happen to like to slug it down straight, what I strongly suggest you do is to drink water afterwards, like drink a glass of water afterwards, or rinse your mouth out, just like you were brushing your teeth, just to wash away the acid from your mouth so it doesn't actually degrade your enamel.
Yeah, that's a good tip, because I spoke to a dentist who's a client of mine, and she was telling me, with this whole fad moving on social media, there were people who were having apple cider vinegar shots. And she said, I could see the nature of their enamel changing. And she said she started asking her patients who came with damaged teeth, and it became a common question: do you have apple cider vinegar? And she said clearly the ones who were diluting it with water, there was absolutely no change in the enamel of their teeth. The ones who were having it stripped out. So that's a great tip. You know what else we've noticed, doctor? For patients with acidity, it's working 2 ways. For some of them, it just relieves them of acidity completely, at least the burning effect. It's not curing the problem. And for some people, it makes them completely acidic, more reflux. Is this because of the change of the pH that's happening at a stomach acid level?
I think it's, reflux. So, now I'm replying to you with the knowledge of a physician. Reflux is a complicated thing. I mean, it's simple in one sense. Reflux is a burning sensation in our upper chest area that is associated with acid of some sort. And it could be you're making more acid compared to normal levels of acid, or the acid that is being made is splashing up outside of your stomach. From your esophagus, there's a little valve that normally keeps the acid in your stomach, because that's where the digestion occurs. And if that valve is loose, you're going to have a leak. And when the acid splashes up, it actually burns and you can get reflux. And, some people, naturally their valve gets loose when they're getting older. And if you're lying flat, you might have more acid running through the leak and causing that burning sensation. Whereas if you sleep on pillows, like at 45 degrees, 30 to 45 degrees, okay, that's not comfortable for many people, but honestly, to relieve that burning, just with physical positioning, that can be a relief as well. Now, there's also anti-acid medications that you can actually take, anti-reflux medication you can take as well. Those tend to be important. So what about the contribution of adding acid to the system? Well, listen, if you've had splashing of the acid from your stomach through a loose valve to your esophagus is already going to be a little bit inflamed. It's going to be irritated. So now you slug down some more acid and it's going to go, oh no, now I've got acid coming from upstairs, like from the mouth, and I've got acid coming from downstairs. So it's going to actually be worse. You're going to actually get an irritation of an area that's already irritated, but from a different side of the equation, right? Because it's splashing from the stomach, it's coming from the bottom up to the esophagus. Now you throw down some acetic acid, concentrated vinegar, acetic acid. Now you're going to actually cause the burning from above. But it has to do with the fact it's already irritated. Now, I wanted to just give everyone a very practical two practical tips or insights into why it's important to deal with reflux. All right. First of all, the thing you need to know is that people who suffer reflux that don't do anything about it, and I'm talking about ignoring it for years, that acid will splash and irritate the esophagus. And that irritation can eventually become so inflamed that over time it can develop into either esophagus cancer or esophagus and stomach cancer, gastroesophageal cancer. That is currently an incurable cancer. So you don't want to go there ever. And it's preventable by dealing with reflux, because then you're actually decreasing the splashing, the injury, and allowing the esophagus and the stomach to heal. All right. That's one reason you want to get away from reflux. The second way you want to actually deal with reflux is that it's uncomfortable at night, especially. Remember, I told you when you're laying flat, that acid, if there's a leak in the valve, is just going to run right out, right? So think about it. You have a bucket, you have a bottle, a soda bottle that's standing straight up. All the liquid's going to be in it. You tip it on its side so it's lying flat like you would be in a bed. A bunch of it's going to come rolling out. And that's what happens to the acid when you're lying flat. Now, what happens is that you wind up getting very uncomfortable, this burning feeling at night, and you're not going to sleep well. All right. That burning, that irritation prevents you from getting a good night's sleep, often wakes you up. All right. And then you're moving around trying to adjust yourself to a better position, and it prevents you from getting a good night's sleep. Sleep is so important for so many of our activities, from the benefits of fasting that we do naturally overnight, intermittent fasting. So it benefits our metabolism. Good sleep benefits our gut microbiome, our healthy bacteria, good, and therefore lowers inflammation, because our healthy gut bacteria lowers inflammation. It also benefits our immune system. Our immune system reboots overnight. So you get a fresh immune system in the morning. Good sleep also improves autophagy, which is basically the body's cleaning out of like useless cells that are not doing much for you. So you have a fresh, you're fresh in the morning, literally. And a lot of people don't know this, but if you've ever had an all-nighter where you're staying up all night, maybe it's at a wedding, maybe it's at a party, maybe it's studying for medical school like I did, where we're up all night, or traveling, jet lag, terrible jet lag across different time zones, and you're not sleeping. All right. The next day, you feel foggy in your brain. You don't feel so clear. Doesn't feel right. You don't feel right. And the reason is, during good quality sleep, there is a sewer grate in our brains, okay, called the glymphatic system, that normally is shut during the day. But at night, when you get good quality sleep, that sewer system opens up, the grates open up, and it drains out the toxins that have accumulated from overall during the day from your brain. And that's why if you don't get good quality sleep, you don't fully drain the toxins. Those toxins are sticking around the next day, and your brain is sort of pickled with some of these toxins that continue to linger, and you don't feel quite right. All right. So in addition to being physically tired and sort of neuronally tired, you also have more toxins in your brain as well. And it takes several more nights, as we all know, of getting good quality sleep to fully drain everything. So you're actually back to getting a good night's sleep, including draining your brain. So I bring this all back to apple cider vinegar, diluting it with water, and making sure you don't get reflux. And if you have reflux, to treat the reflux, to deal with the reflux, because if you don't deal with the reflux, there can be some really, really bad health consequences that are not worth having. Believe me, trust me on this one, and are preventable. So here we are talking about integrative health. This is one of those easy steps in order to be able to prevent a problem later on.
Oh, thank you for that. And that's something I really appreciate about you, doctor. You don't just talk about a food, you always link it in with different lifestyles, because a lot of people think just have this food and I'm going to get well. I love how you explained the glymphatic system. Sleep is very close to us because we've seen the direct impact of our patients' sleep deprivation one night, and their blood count, their cravings for food, their emotional health, their reactions, all of that is so interconnected. And I love that you spoke about acid reflux, because in our country, acidity is a huge problem. And while a lot of people think that because they're acidic or they have reflux, they have more acid, we have a bigger problem in our country where people actually have low stomach acid. And we have H. pylori, which is huge. And it usually goes undiagnosed until, a patient gets an endoscopy done, and then you find out you've had an H. pylori growing in you. But thank you for linking the two of them together. And I want to talk about, this is mentioned in both of your books, and I love this. You spoke about many bacteria that we require in the prebiotic and probiotic space. And I want to talk today about the Akkermansia that you speak about so often in most of your chapters in your book, and its incredible role in our body. Number one, it is a bacteria, right? It's a gram-negative anaerobic bacteria. But the point is, it's available in simple foods that we eat. And I would love for you to talk about its connection with our immune system, our fat metabolism, and obesity as well.
Okay, so let's start with the big picture first, because you mentioned bacteria, of which Akkermansia muciniphila is one bacteria. It's one bacteria of 39 trillion bacteria in our bodies that are healthy. And so, when we're born and as we grow up, as healthy kids, we have a gut microbiome or healthy gut bacteria that grows with us. It's a neighborhood of healthy bacteria that works in collaboration with our own body to maintain health. All right. If our gut bacteria is healthy, meaning if our gut is healthy, the rest of our body tends to be healthy as well because of this incredibly important role. In fact, in my first book, Eat to Beat Disease, and I do teach a digital course about the gut health as one of the body's health defense systems. It's a defense system, and it protects us against disease and maintains our health. That there's 39 trillion bacteria. So where do they live? They live in our gut. Well, our gut's a pretty long organ. It starts from our mouth. Our mouth is the beginning of the gut, and the tail end, the tailpipe, or the anus is the end, right? So all the way through there, you got your mouth, you got your esophagus, you got your stomach, you got your small intestines, and you got your large intestines, and you got the rectum, and then everything is out. That's basically how food goes in and then out the back, all right? Now, where does the bacteria live? Well, actually, there's probably bacteria in a lot of places. We know the mouth has it, but a lot of the gut bacteria we talk about with the gut microbiome, all right, the world of microbes that are healthy, live in our colon. That's our large intestines. In fact, we even know where they live in the colon. They primarily live in an area of the colon that's kind of like baggy. It's like a sack. It's like a stack you would take to the market to fill with vegetables, all right? And that sack is called the cecum, spelled C-E-C-U-M, happens to be exactly where the appendix is the appendix in your gut that sometimes is removed. In fact, we're beginning to rethink maybe the role of the appendix from being a useless vestigial organ, meaning we don't need it, to maybe it's actually a air traffic control kind of function for our gut microbiome, because all the gut bacteria, healthy gut bacteria, is right there. So again, we're continuously discovering and rediscovering new things about the body that is very exciting for me as a scientist and as a doctor to be able to apply to things. So gut microbiome. Now, of these 39 trillion bacteria, we're just at the tip of the iceberg being able to understand what the role of this gut bacteria is. We know that if the bacteria, the neighborhood of bacteria, the ecosystem is unhealthy, we know all kinds of problems actually can occur. Dysbiosis, inflammatory bowel disease, irritable bowel, all kinds of things. But it's much bigger than that. We know that your gut is responsible for healthy metabolism. It helps insulin sensitivity. All right. So you want actually, if you want good blood sugars, you want your gut to be healthy. We also know that it actually, the gut bacteria speak to our immune system, because 70% of our immune system is actually present in the wall of our gut. This is a new discovery as well. When I went to medical school, we were taught, the immune system's in your spleen and it's in your circulation, it's in your blood, it's in your thymus gland. No, actually, most of our immune system is actually in our gut. And our gut bacteria talks to the immune system. And when people go, well, what does that mean? For people who might remember their days in college, you go and live in a dormitory with students, other students, and, the walls are very thin in a dormitory where students live. And basically when students in one room want to speak to the next room, you can shout literally through the wall, and then the student next door can hear. And this is what bacteria do to the immune system. Bacteria in one room, one dorm room, the immune system in the other dorm, and the bacteria goes, hey, do this, immune system, and the immune system, okay, I'll do that. And so this is how they talk back and forth. So when so good healthy gut bacteria actually props up your immune system. Now, why is that important? Because good healthy immunity can be important in conducting surveillance in your body against cancer. Cancer forms as microscopic cells everywhere, and we want our immune system to conduct surveillance like policemen making a patrol through a neighborhood to look for problems. And they see a little microscopic cancer, a good, strong immune system will just knock out that cancer, take it away, take it to the jail, all right, destroy it. That's really important to us as well. Okay, so where does Akkermansia fit in? Well, of the many, many, many trillions of bacteria that are in our gut, we're beginning to identify certain bacteria that have important functions. And one of the most important ones that has been discovered, and I'm saying one of them because there's so many we haven't yet discovered. This is the tip of the iceberg, literally, is Akkermansia muciniphila. Now, Akkermansia is the first name, muciniphila is the last name. That's the genus and species. We call it muciniphila because mucin is mucus and phila means love. So this is the bacteria that loves mucus, natural mucus that's in our gut. All right. And it grows in the mucus in our gut. It eats the mucus, actually. So it feeds off the mucus. So, but what we've discovered is that Akkermansia, when people have abundant, good Akkermansia muciniphila growing in their gut, their blood sugar, their metabolism, insulin sensitivity, a lot better. Okay. It is a guardian of our metabolism. Think about that. Of 39 trillion bacteria, at least one species seems to be a guardian of healthy metabolism. And we've been missing this for decades. Like it's the blood sugar, it's the insulin, it's the, other hormones, glucagon. Listen, our gut bacteria is a key player in this. So recognizing that this key player is important is absolutely vital for good metabolism. What about cancer? This is the most jaw-dropping thing that I've seen. One of the most jaw-dropping things I've seen in many decades is that in 2017, I helped to convene a conference in Paris, France, called Rethinking Cancer. And one of the researchers, the faculty that presented her work there was Dr. Laurence Zitvogel. She is a immuno-oncologist, meaning she studies the immune system and cancer. And she presented work that showed that people with different types of cancer that were being treated with a type of cancer treatment that activates the immune system. So your own immune system can knock out the cancer. One of the most natural ways you can think about treating cancer, very sophisticated. I mean, it's really where cures are coming from, all right, literally, all right? It's really dramatic, but it doesn't work in many of the people. It only works in about 20% of the people, meaning this potentially groundbreaking, life-saving cancer treatment doesn't work in 80% of people. How crazy is that, right? What makes the difference between a non-responder to a responder to immunotherapy when you've got cancer? That's a life or death question. That's not a trivial question. It's not a nice to know question. It's a must know. So Dr. Zitvogel, my colleague Dr. Zitvogel, presented that the first discovery back then, 2017. So we're talking about something that's only a few years old, that showed that Akkermansia, muciniphila, is what makes the difference between whether you're going to respond to immunotherapy against cancer or you're not going to respond. People, you don't have it, you're unlikely to respond. Okay, that's life or death. All right, that's death. If you have it, you're likely to respond because your immune system is stronger, because Akkermansia shouts through the wall at the immune system and say, hey, guys, wake up. We got to go after this cancer. All right. Shakes the tree and says, go after that cancer. This to me is one of the most profound examples of how our gut microbiome can actually influence our health, when it matters the most. Okay. So Akkermansia lives in the gut. It's a natural bacteria in the gut, lives in the mucus of your gut. You have mucus because we've all had diarrhea before. If you had a lot of diarrhea, some of the mucus comes out. It's normally healthy in the gut. So if you want more Akkermansia, you want actually to give it more food. You want to give it a nice bed of mucus to grow in, right? So how do you do that? Well, it turns out there are certain foods that can help your gut secrete mucus. And the more mucus you have, the more Akkermansia is going to grow in there. What are those foods? Well, pomegranate is actually one of the fruits that naturally have juice. And that juice contains a natural chemical called allagitannins. Those allagitannins help your gut, encourage your gut to secrete mucus. All right. So pomegranate juice, pomegranate seeds, cranberries, which I don't think you can get normal cranberries like growing naturally in India. But for example, you can get dried cranberries. Those are pretty easy to get. Cranberries also have allagitannins, and they encourage your gut to secrete mucus as well. Akkermansia has been shown to grow with that. Concord grape juice, it's a particular kind of grape. It's a kind of super sweet grape. If you've ever had grape candy as a kid, all right, like most of us have enjoyed grape candies, purple, all artificial color, all artificial flavor. But that artificial flavor was designed to mimic the flavor of something called Concord grapes. It was developed in New England years ago in a town called Concord, Massachusetts. That particular grape, whatever's in it, actually helps your gut secrete mucus. Akkermansia can grow with that. Okay, so what about something that you can find in Southeast Asia? Black vinegar, fermented vinegar, black fermented vinegar. That actually grows Akkermansia as well. All right, so it's cool that we're beginning to discover the bacteria that being helpful for us, our health. It's also cool that we're beginning to discover the foods that can encourage that bacteria to grow. And of course, I think that if you look on the internet, you can start finding different supplement companies that are making probiotics made with Akkermansia. I think the quality control of those is still in discussion. I tend to sort of say, do your research before you just buy a supplement off the internet, because who knows what else is in it and who knows the quality of it. Try to find a reputable source. Here in the United States, you can actually get a very, very pure Akkermansia online. But again, this is a story that's unfolding, and it's just one bacteria. I mean, there's so many other bacteria out there, but you were asking about one that I've written about, and I think that the more we look at it, by the way, Akkermansia also seems to be correlated with a lower risk for dementia as well in an aging population. We don't understand the mechanism yet, but gut-brain connection is obviously there too.
No, thanks for that. I picked up on this particular one from your book because it mentioned pomegranate, which grows abundantly in our country, and it has the same
Mm.
bioactives which we use in our ER positive breast cancer protocols as well, and prostate
Ah,
as well. Yeah, and that's why it kind of fascinated me. Your research also spoke about pomegranate juice, but I wanted to ask you, is there any difference between eating the pomegranate and having the juice? Is it better for me if I have the juice? Because we usually recommend our patients to eat the fruit as a whole, break down
yeah,
the fiber and break it down. But
yeah,
some of the patients, like with an esophageal cancer or they've gone through a mouth cancer, they can only be on a liquid diet. So they would have a pomegranate juice, but they're also
yeah,
heavily diabetic, which kind of pushes up their blood sugar levels. But
yeah,
does the research change if I move from a juice to a full form or a full form to a juice?
yeah. It's a great question. Um, uh, as a general rule, I always say eating the whole food is always going to be better for you because you get other nutrients, micronutrients, and you get more of the dietary fiber, much more actually if you eat the whole pomegranate fruit. So I encourage people to eat the pomegranate fruit. There's juice that's in the fruit, but as well, so you'll get the ellagitannins for sure. The juice itself to drink, I caution people when they're drinking pomegranate juice. First, you don't need very much to grow Akkermansia and get good mucus from your colon. You only need 1 cup, one small fluid cup. All right. That's not very much. It's like 2 shot glasses, boom, boom, and you're done for the day. All right. This is not about drinking a big, tall smoothie, of pomegranate juice. It's very sweet. You can overload on your sugar on there. So I encourage people to stick with like just 1 cup max if you're doing the juice. The second thing with the juice is that be very careful of the provenance or the origins of the juice and what's put in it because, pomegranate juice, you squeeze it from a pomegranate. Okay. It's pure juice. And there are makers of pure pomegranate juice. On the other hand, many commercial brands of pomegranate juice will have other things added to it. You do not want added sugar. You don't want other additives. You don't want any artificial coloring or flavoring or anything else. So, if you're going to drink the juice because you have difficulty eating the whole fruit, don't drink very much of it. 1 cup a day is more than enough. And even that's a pretty hefty sugar load. All right. So you want to be careful about not doing more than that. You're not doing this to satisfy your thirst. You're not drinking pomegranate juice for hydration. You are drinking it specifically to get those polyphenols that actually help your colon secrete the mucus so that your Akkermansia can grow.
Oh, that's a great tip. Thank you for that. You spoke about hydration and you've written a whole chapter in your new book as well. And I know you love your coffee because I see it in all of your lives. I see it in your Instagram and your books that you go through a couple of cups of coffee and green tea in a day. I would love for you to talk about your research on black coffee. You've written so much about, brown fat, white fat when it comes to black coffee, the health of the liver. I would love for you to talk about coffee because people, again, are fearful of coffee, and we encourage them to be fearful of coffee that has all the added sugars and the flavors and the whipped creams and all of that stuff. But when we're talking about plain, good quality black coffee, I would love for you to share your research on that. And how
Yeah.
much
So,
can we, like
yeah.
a man or
So,
woman?
yeah. That's a great question. So let me just say that I wrote a chapter in Eat to Beat Your Diet, my book on metabolism and healthy eating, and losing body fat, because people are always asking me questions about like what's a good beverage to drink, and as it turns out, my research shows that there is a holy trinity, as I call it, of beverages. Holy trinity, three very, very important beverages that are good for you and not bad for you. Okay. And those holy trinity is water, clean water, ideally clean water that comes from, a clean source and not from a plastic bottle. So many people now, are beginning to move away quickly from the plastic water bottles that are sold everywhere. You go on vacation, it's a hot weather. like I'm sure it is in India. And like, where do you go? You go to the person selling some cold water naturally out of a plastic bottle. Number one, the plastic bottle is bad for the planet. All right, that plastic does not get recycled. You know that there's a place, Luke, in the Pacific Ocean that's like a giant raft of plastic and garbage that's floating out there. It's so big that ships can't even navigate through it. Like a tanker can't even go through it; it has to go around it. So number one, it's not good for the planet. But even worse, we now realize that plastic bottles with good quality water turn that water into bad quality water because the plastic bottles are cheap and they shed microplastics. All right, and those microplastics get everywhere. All right, now a few years ago, when I was asked this, I'm like, we don't really know what the harm of microplastic is. It's probably not good for you. We now know that, in many countries, like in the United States and Europe, on average, we're consuming plastic from the wrappers, from containers that we store the food in. But on average, we consume one credit card's worth of plastic every week. That's how much plastic we eat from our food. And these microplastics have now been discovered to be in our blood. They've been discovered in the atherosclerotic plaques that narrow your blood vessels in cardiovascular disease. And in fact, a study in Italy showed last year that people who have microplastics studding, like embedded in the plaques that are narrowing their arteries in their neck, compared to the people who don't have plastic in their arteries, that those with plastic in their plaques have a 4-fold increase in having a fatal heart attack or stroke. Now, it's a correlation, but it's a scary one. And now we're beginning to realize you can do a blood test and even detect microplastics in normal blood. We can detect microplastics in the human brain. That's a research study that came out recently. So much plastic that you can actually measure 2 brains on a scale. And you can actually measure the one that's heavier because it's got more plastic in it. So that's really how significant it is. They found plastic in testicles. They found plastic in the human penis. Urologists who are doing penile implants have found it in the tissue. And they've also found plastic in human semen as well. So look, we can't ignore this anymore. If you're going to actually drink water, which is really healthy for you, helps you actually lose visceral fat, get it, and make sure that you're getting the cleanest possible source, not in plastic. Second, tea. Tea, also made with water, so be careful about the plastic it's stored in, like iced tea or whatever. A tea is really, really good for you. Green tea, matcha tea, black tea, fermented teas, all good for you because of the polyphenols. As long as you don't add milk to it, dairy will trap the polyphenols. So when you drink it, you're actually missing out. Like the bubble of the saturated fat around polyphenols gets flushed through your system. You miss the opportunity to absorb it into your bloodstream. All right. And coffee is a third of the Holy Trinity. Coffee is a plant-based beverage, comes from the coffee bean. The bean grows on a tree. The tree, the origin of coffee goes back more than 4,000 years. In fact, goes so far back in human history that we can't even identify an origin story. So coffee was consumed before recorded history. All right. That's how far back it goes. We think it started in Ethiopia, that area that we call Ethiopia today. And they're beans that actually grow, berries that actually grow on a low-lying shrub tree. Pick those, dry them, roast them, and inside this the seed of this berry, the coffee berry, you wind up having polyphenols, lots of polyphenols, caffeic acid, chlorogenic acid. These are some of the natural bioactives that found. Chlorogenic acid helps you burn harmful body fat. So drinking coffee actually revs up your metabolism and helps you burn fat. So long as you don't put dairy fat in it, which is saturated fat, and so long as you don't actually put sugar in it. Like, you don't want to add sugar to coffee, even though it's popular, because then you're adding calories and you're taking some fat away. You're growing some fat. Net, you're not going to be making progress on it. And you definitely don't want to be putting artificial sweeteners in it because, people say, well, let me just use a non-caloric sweetener for my coffee. Wrong move. and again, this is recent discoveries have shown that these artificial sweeteners actually don't get absorbed as calories. So you're right, they don't increase your blood sugar by themselves, but ironically, they actually poison the gut microbiome. They cause your gut to be unhealthy. They kill healthy bacteria. And now your insulin sensitivity doesn't work as well, and your blood lipids don't work as well. So people who drink a lot of beverages with artificial sweeteners, guess what? Their blood sugars actually rise, despite the fact they're not drinking actual sugar, and their inflammatory levels rise because their gut microbiome is sick, and their blood lipids rise as well because the gut microbiome helps to lower lipids. So everything that you wanted to do by drinking coffee gets reversed by putting artificial sweeteners. So don't do that. So water, tea, coffee, the holy trinity.
Awesome. There we have it. No, I want to correlate with what you said because we have a lot of diabetics over the years who moved from sugar to all of these natural artificial sweeteners. And although they didn't have calories, they lost a little bit of weight, but their blood sugar levels don't come down, their lipids don't get better. And they have one commonality, poor gut health, right through until we stop the artificial sugars and everything changes. You're spot on with that point. It's brilliant.
Yes.
Doctor, I wanted to talk something. Came back to the gut. There are so many of these tests today, these microbiome tests, and you get this big report with like so many different strains that it says you don't have, you have too much. And then they suggest a probiotic or they suggest it's just too much to make scientific sense and be accurate. I think we've never really ordered that test from any of our patients, except in 2 instances in the last 10 years where no one could figure out what was going on in the gut. It was a colorectal cancer patient in remission, but just not recovering. And so he wanted to get his test done in London. He got this whole report done because we said, okay, we can't find anything. Let's see what the report's telling us. But now today it's sold like candy. Like, hey, you can just order a test and then you get all of this data, which is cool, but no one knows what to do with it. Because how do you know how much of a bacteria, like you said, the Akkermansia is just one of them? And how much do we put into the system? I think we're kind of playing around with a very sensitive ecology within the gut. I just wanted to know your take as a physician, as a scientist, as a cellular nutritionist on these tests. And is there a place for them? I'm sure there's a place for them, but should it be mainstream where everyone can just do these tests and create more anxiety around their gut health?
Yeah. Listen, as I mentioned earlier, this is a new frontier for medicine and understanding health and wellness and how to diagnose and treat and manage disease is by looking at our gut microbiome. But we are really just at the beginning of a long journey where I have no doubt that next year we're going to discover some more than this year, and the following year we're going to hit more breakthroughs and so on and so forth. So we are taking baby steps in this new era of appreciating the gut microbiome and health. I wish we could actually all go into a time machine and go 50 years in the future when things will be so easy to understand and simplified so that people don't get confused. So we're in this, but right now, back to the present day, we're in this exciting, but sometimes confusing, sometimes frustrating period of time where the realization that gut microbiome is important is here. The technology to begin measuring the gut microbiome is also available, not to everyone, and it's not particularly cheap, and nor is it all the same, meaning not all the measurements are accurate. Different companies are trying their own things. We haven't standardized the way to do it yet. There's advantages and disadvantages for different ways of measuring. And the reports that come out, you're absolutely right, Luke. I mean, it's sort of just basically printing out the telephone book, as we used to say. You get this enormous list of bacteria. I mean, listen, one of the most challenging courses I ever took when I went to medical school was microbiology, because seemingly that's all we did was memorize bacteria. Okay. One bacteria after the other. It got so like my vision got blurry. I couldn't even think straight. There were so many bacteria to memorize. And now we're expecting a consumer or even a doctor who's not trained in this to actually make sense, heads or tails, make any sense of the results. Okay. So in the future, it's going to be clear and easy to understand. But again, research is still underway. And so we're at this awkward time. Let me say that I do believe that when you work with a doctor who is familiar with gut health, trained in the microbiome, and this is something that increasingly integrative medicine specialists, gastroenterologists, not everybody, it's not mainstream yet, but there are specialists that are working in this. I mean, I happen to be working in the gut microbiome as well at a very, very deep molecular and cellular level. There are some of us who actually are more comfortable than others interpreting the results. And we're the first people to tell you we don't know everything. Okay, so when you're a patient, if you encounter somebody saying, "Oh, I know everything about the gut microbiome," you know that person is not a real researcher, because the real researchers go, man, like we probably know less than 1% of what needs to be known, what is to be known. But bear with us. There is some information. There is something useful we can come out of it. So I want to tell anybody who wants to get a gut microbiome test, number one, go for it, but recognize you're going to be a little bit on your own, and you need to find a navigator. You need to find somebody to help you find that path. If you're going into the jungle, okay, on a camping trip, you probably don't want to wander in there by yourselves, with your family. Go with somebody who knows the path, who can actually take you through and avoid all the pitfalls and not get lost or confused. What I suggest is finding somebody who does integrative medicine, who has an interest in gut health, who has experience with gut microbiome interpretation, okay, and then can recommend a good test for you. Now, I will just kind of try to break it down as easy as I can right now. When you get back a gut microbiome test, you can think about the results in 3 categories. The first is, they say, how diverse is your gut microbiome? All right. Diversity is really important because we've got 39 trillion of these guys. And just like any healthy community, the more diversity we have, the healthier the community is. When you've got people of different sizes and shapes and professions, and people that speak different languages, and have people that have different skill sets, you got the plumber, you've got the engineer, you've got the chef. Like the more diverse the community is, the healthier the community is going to be. Similarly, in the gut microbiome, when you look at the results, you want to look for diversity. Do you have good, healthy? Is it very diverse? If it is, okay, that's a box check. Good. You're in the right direction. If your diversity is very poor, low diversity, not good. All right. Now you need to eat more plant-based foods. You need to really work on getting your gut bacteria more diverse. If your doctor can't say even that to you, they're not familiar with the gut microbiome, number one. Number two, second category that you might get out of a gut microbiome report is, do you have any bad guys? All right. So, just sort of like sweeping a big fishing net in the ocean, which I know is politically not a good thing to be doing these days, and you're catching some healthy fish, you might catch some sharks as well. All right. Some mean fish. And similarly, when you're doing your gut microbiome, are there any bad guys there? Any evil, nasty critters there? We can find them. And if you've got bad guys, that's important to know, because those bad bacteria can actually cause different diseases. And that information should be enough to get your integrative doctor, your gastroenterologist, or your functional doctor to be able to start thinking on your behalf. This is not consumer level. If you got, Clostridia difficile in your gut, you're not going to be treating yourself. You need to work with your doctor who is familiar to figure out what's a good way to approach lowering the bad guys or killing the bad guys. Most likely it's not simply writing an antibiotic. You know why? Because an antibiotic is going to kill the good guys too. And that brings me to the other category. So do you have good diversity? Do you have bad guys? And then the third thing is that, do you have enough good guys? Are you missing some of the good guys? Are you missing Akkermansia? Are you missing lactobacillus? Are you missing bifidobacteria? These are good guys. All right. And for anybody listening, the whole point is that it's not for the average person, the average patient, to actually have to memorize all this. It's not your responsibility. It's the responsibility of somebody who you're going to partner with, who can help you interpret this. Do you have enough good guys? Now, if you're missing good guys, you might want to actually think about eating more fermented food, eating more prebiotic foods with dietary fiber and polyphenols. and seeing if you grow back some of the good guys. All right. And could you then use this information to select the probiotic? Possibly. And again, rather than just reach out into the internet and pull out probiotics or get, convinced by somebody who's marketing their own probiotic, I would say work with somebody who you trust, who's got the right credentials to help you decide if dietary supplements or probiotics would be appropriate. So the three categories. So number one, I do think that it's worthwhile in some cases to check your gut microbiome, but only if you actually have somebody who can guide you through the results. Number two, the results can be broken down into some very simple ways. Do you have diversity? High diversity, good. Low diversity, bad. Do you have bad guys? Lots of bad guys present, not good. Low bad guys or no bad guys, great. Do you have enough good guys? Lots of good guys, fantastic. Good gut health. Not enough good guys or missing some good guys, you got some work to do. That's, I would say, Luke, probably the way I would encourage people to have a grounding, a foundation of understanding of this exciting, super important, but sometimes confusing field for people who aren't familiar with it.
Thank you so much. I think that's great advice and it's great direction for people who want to go that way. I think I'm going to ask you one last question. Between the last time we spoke and now, what have you been working on? What's the new research that you're looking at? Anything exciting coming up? I would love for you to leave us with that.
Yeah, well, I write about what I'm doing research on, and so I'm actually working on my next book right now. I'm not prepared to reveal everything that it's about, but I will tell you what I'm working on right now. I'm actually working on a new area, a scientific area that talks about healthy aging and how we stay very active and bright. How do we make our quality of lives really, really good? Because there's a lot of conversation about longevity, and I think there's a lot of conflation with glucose spiking and glucose crashing and sirtuin's been activated and NAD this and mitochondria that. Listen, I'm a scientist, so I can handle that kind of language, but in the same way that the gut microbiome can be confusing for, the average person who is interested in health, not trained in science or medicine, to hear mitochondria or glucose spiking, it's quite a difficult challenge to really understand, well, what does that mean for me? Should I be worried about it? It might sound scary. And so what I'm working on is I'm doing work that relates to aging, healthy aging. I'm very familiar with longevity research. Okay. And I want to actually just say this. It's so exciting what's being discovered by scientists on longevity that, it is a field in and of itself, longevity, scientific field. I'm not 100% convinced myself that it's ready for prime time. So to be blasted out on podcasts and, on Instagram and all these other social media channels, because, many of these discoveries are being made in fruit flies, in roundworms, in lab mice, genetic knockout mice. So it's exciting. And scientists like me will talk with another scientist about it, but I'm not sure it's ready to be presented to the public yet because it's not human qualified yet. It's not verified. So I'm interested in something that we can all naturally associate our feelings with, like it becomes real to us. And as we all get older, right? I mean, if you're 40, you're going to be 41 soon, and then you're going to be 50 soon, and then you're going to be 60 soon. If you're 60, you're going to be 70 soon. And if you're 10 years or you're old, pretty soon you're going to be 20 years old, right? So the point is that we're all aging all the time, but we're conscious of it, right? So whether you're 10 or 40 or 60, you're very conscious of your aging, where you are. How many candles are on your birthday cake is sometimes what we say. But rather than just spend all your time counting the candles, how are you feeling? How well are you feeling? How alive do you actually feel? That's quality of life. Quality of life is not just having enough money to buy things so you can entertain yourself, but quality of life starts inside us. So that's my area of research now. I'm taking a look at your health defenses, your metabolism, and what's the next level? How do we up our game? Well, upping our game is really improving our quality of life. What does that mean? from a health perspective? What does that mean from a food perspective, a dietary perspective? How do we eat to actually activate our quality of living? That's what I'm doing right now. It does relate to aging, because as we get older, having good quality, when you're a kid, you tend to have a pretty good quality of life. You're out playing most of the time. When you're in your 20s and 30s, you're working, and then you reward yourself with a quality of life. But when you get a little bit older, you're wondering what happened to my quality of life, or how do I get more quality of life? So that's what I'm working on right now. This whole science of quality of living, and specifically, what are the foods you can eat, and what are some of the lifestyle things that you can do in order to be able to enhance this at any age.
That's so exciting. I can't wait for the book to come out. What I love about it, again, is your honesty, because we have people coming with these research papers and saying, hey, Luke, I'm starting NAD. I'm going to live longer. I'm doing red light therapy. And we're like, that's all great. We don't have enough of information. Where's the human study? But in the meantime, let's talk about your sleep. Let's talk about
Right.
your emotional health. Let's talk about your nutrition. Let's get the basics right, because we don't have enough of information to yet say that, a lot of people are jet lagged and sleep deprived, but they're taking NAD thinking it's going to like do the work that sleep does. And clearly it doesn't. So
I just want to say one thing, which is that the quest for immortality has been around for millennia. Humans going all the way back to our earliest civilization, our earliest folk stories and myths. There's always been some emperor or conqueror who actually has been looking for that magic ampule or magic stones that will help us live forever. And so finally, science is allowing us to see a little bit of the directions that we might go. But as you're correctly saying, from my perspective, as exciting as that is, I think more work needs to be done. And in the meantime, there's so many other actionable steps. Rather than look for that one magic bullet, let's work on all those other things that allow us to live, very rich, fulfilling lives.
Dr. Lee, thank you so much. This has been amazing. I'm mindful of your time, and I really appreciate it. Your podcast are always filled with honesty, science, done on real people and not just mice. And I just love your work. Thank you so much for inspiring all of us. I have a whole university with students as well, and a lot that we teach them is a lot that in fact, we recommend your books to all of our students to read as well. And thank you so much for your time. And I look forward to getting your time at some point, because I didn't cover brown fat and white fat. I know people can read your book and they can pretty much understand it, but maybe at some point we can have a discussion on that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, listen, and if people want to, they'll thank you. And if people want to actually check out more information, I've been putting a lot of content out from people that have been sending me questions out on my YouTube channel, which is at Dr. Dr. William Lee Li. Come check it out. I'm just putting out information every single week. And if you love this podcast, you're going to love all the other information that I'm spitting out there. So looking forward to it. And I would love to look forward to the next conversation as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Doctor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay tuned for more. We're going to continue our journey, learning, sharing, and evolving.